Good day, everybody. How's it going? Meister here, and welcome back to another episode of Oxbourg. A couple of episodes ago in Oxbourg, we lowered our unemployment rate from just under 50% to just 30% by effectively doubling the size of downtown by plopping dozens and dozens of new fancy skyscrapers, each containing hundreds and hundreds of new office jobs. However, all of these new fancy desk jobs benefit only the citizens who are already in the more wealthy class of the city, who are already the most educated citizens in Oxbourg. And these new fancy desk jobs do very little to benefit all of the folks working in industries who are less educated. So that is why in this episode, we're going to be helping out the less fortunate, the less educated, that still makes up about half of the city's demographic. Now, I'm going to come out of cinematic mode here, and you're going to see that the city is kind of in shambles at the moment. And you'll notice that in a sea of citizens waiting for hearses, you can spot a number of garbage piling up icons. And we don't have to look too far to realize that the death wave that we're currently experiencing is a direct result of the garbage pile-up situation, because if we look at our fancy new cemetery that can contain up to 12,000 people and has up to 21 vehicles that can be dispatched, we're currently only using 11, and we have 6 vehicles in maintenance at the moment. And now if you look at the efficiency rating of our cemetery, we're getting a negative 50% debuff because of piled up garbage. The root of the issue is garbage piling up. So we're going to take a look over here in our little industrial zone just outside of downtown. We're going to take a look at our recycling center, and we'll notice that we are just totally maxed out. We're actually like overflowing with garbage. So we need to increase our processing speed because we just can't do anything with the building that we have right now. Let me just check my info views to see what's going on here. We can see that our garbage processing status is kind of teetering on the edge of this orange bar here, and then we'll be really in trouble if we get to that point because we have no landfill availability. We have 0 landfills on this entire map to act as a kind of buffer. Because normally if you dip into the red zone, let's say, and you don't have enough garbage processing power, then your landfill will kind of kick in and garbage will just slowly pile up until you do have that extra garbage processing power. But in this case, we don't have that cushion, so really we're gonna be forced to do some upgrades here. So what we can do, what our options are we can build a storage extension, and that will give us an extra 250 tons of storage capacity, but that really won't do much for our garbage processing capacity like a hazardous waste collection point will. Oh, okay, this building isn't quite as large as I was expecting, so we can probably go ahead and plop one of each of these upgrades. So I'm gonna start with the hazardous waste collection point, and I'm gonna plop this bad boy. Let's see here. I don't want to cause too much damage. I will probably be forced to replace a number of buildings, but I think right here should actually be okay. So that's going to increase our processing speed up to 1750. However, we're still at 0 at the moment because we're just overflowing with garbage. So we're going to make some room. We're going to provide some more storage so that we can continue processing garbage. And I think what I'll do, I don't want to destroy all of this industry because I'm trying to save as many jobs as I possibly can. And we have a little bit of space in behind here that maybe I can do a bit of landscaping in behind. Maybe like this. I don't want to go too crazy, but I think something like this should work. And then if I build a road kind of going out back like this, and then maybe we'll make like a little zigzag just like this. I hope we'll be able to fit. Oh no, the distance is too long. Oh wow, okay. What are we gonna do now? Okay, well, I might be forced to actually get rid of some jobs, but that's okay. So I'll remove these 2 buildings, and then I will... Distance still too long. Okay, maybe I'll have to, like, do something like this, maybe? Yeah, okay, well, let's convert this 3-lane asymmetrical road into an actual zonable road. And then, can we do this? We most certainly can. Beautiful. And then we're not gonna... Oh, okay, awesome. Perfect, that works out beautifully. So I really didn't have to do all of this landscaping, so I'm just gonna smooth everything back out, make it look somewhat natural. And there we have it. All right, so we're gonna kick this recycling center into gear. Now this is gonna buy us a little bit of time, but ultimately I think even with these upgrades, the recycling center is gonna succumb to the demand of garbage processing. So maybe, do we wanna build another storage extension? Or actually, instead of investing any more into this building, why don't we go across the pond over here to our massive incineration plant, which has an enormous amount of processing speed. And we still have a ton of stored garbage. However, okay, yeah, we're maxing out our 50 vehicles that can be used. And I think there's an upgrade, yes, the garbage truck depot, which has an additional 25 trucks. Let's go for it. And then processing speed. Okay, so we're 3,500 out of 3,000, and that's because we're running at 117% efficiency. Employee happiness. Okay, so our employees are enjoying their employment, and they're happy to do some overtime. But do we maybe want to build another incineration furnace? That'll give us another 1,500 tons of processing capacity. Maybe. Let's do it. We can afford it, right? We're still over 6 million in profit in the bank. And we're not even filling up our storage, so I'd say we go for it. There, okay. And at this point, we're pretty much just gonna have to let the simulation play out naturally, because we have like 100 and some vehicles that are out in the field that are gonna go collect garbage now. 14 out of 25 vehicles in use. Where are the other like 10 vehicles? Where, how come they're not going out? Our building is running at plus 17% efficiency. Yeah, maybe we just have to let the simulation play out. Okay, well, with that house cleaning done, we're gonna have to start building some more industry, because I'm gonna check my demographics here, or rather I should check my education level. So what's happening is we can see here that 27%, or just about a quarter of the city's population is highly educated. Another 15-ish% is well educated, and we'll just round it off to 15% is educated. And these 3 categories of citizens will tend to prefer office jobs, you know, the more skilled jobs. Whereas look at this, we have 35% of our population that is poorly educated, and another 9%, so almost half of our entire population is poorly and uneducated. These types of citizens tend to prefer industry jobs and or commercial type jobs, you know, more unskilled work. And of course, I'm not being insensitive to anybody who works in these fields. Obviously, we need people to work all kinds of service-based jobs and industry jobs. You know, trades are all the rage right now. And honestly, people who are working these kind of jobs are making a killing these days. And honestly, all of these kind of jobs are pretty much the backbone of any civilization. So I'm just actually curious, before we go any farther, I just want to see what kind of jobs are at the recycling center. Can we see this somehow? If we scroll down, maybe. Where do we see this? Oh, I think under employees. Okay, yeah, so we have 28 poorly educated employees and then a bunch of educated and well-educated. So probably like managers and, you know, people who work in an office. This is probably why we have a good collection of, you know, various jobs. But all in all, yeah, we're really gonna have to ramp up our industry numbers if we're really gonna make a dent in our unemployment rate. But as you can see already, the upgrades that we've done to our recycling center and our incineration plant have already begun to take effect. Look at that. Our death wave is slowly being dealt with, and there's still garbage piling up, but maybe it's just going to take a bit longer for that to be dealt with. Anyways, so what we're going to be doing this episode is actually kind of unique, and I've actually been wanting to do this for quite some time. We have some quite large hills on the outskirts of the city, and let's take a look here at our natural resources. We can see that there is an abundance of ore on this map, a crazy amount of ore. So we've already tapped into a lot of the forestry on this map, and that forestry is slowly being consumed. A lot of these plants are kind of beginning to get dry, waiting for the forest to replenish themselves. But we have all of this ore ready to be extracted from the ground. So in this episode, we're going to be building a large quarry up in the northern mountains just outside of town, and we're going to start to get some ore mining operations going on in the city. Those alone are not going to be enough, however, to lower unemployment that much more. However, if we get a lot of specialized ore industry going up here in the mountains, whenever we go and zone industry, just plain old industrial manufacturing, a lot of what is going to be built up naturally will be in the kind of ore mining category. So in essence, getting large ore mining operations going will stimulate the economy and get some new ore related industries to spawn in the city once we get them zoned in. So I guess this episode, we're just going to focus on the quarry itself, because I mean, the quarry itself is going to be quite an extensive project, and then perhaps in the next episode we can focus on actually building out an industrial area that can then take that ore and process it into various materials to then be sold locally or be exported. And without further delay, we're going to jump right into it. And the remainder of this episode will be in time-lapse mode at 250%. So that means the footage that you're seeing right now is at 2.5 times real time. And with this being such a large and extensive project, I pretty much have no choice but to record in time-lapse mode so you guys get to see the whole thing. So it's quick enough to where I can show you guys the entire build process, but not too quick to where you miss everything if you blink. So anyways, the first order that I must complete is terraforming a giant pit, essentially, into the ground. So I've kind of randomly chose a depth. So the deepest part of the pit was kind of like haphazardly chosen. And then what I'm doing for the contours, or kind of like these steps that you're seeing, is I'm going about 10 meters in increments, using the contour lines on the map. So each one of these contour lines, I think, represents about 10 meters. So each one of these steps is going to be about 10 meters. And I'm basically just working my way up until I get to the top of the mountain. So kind of like to the natural height of these hills. And the quarry itself, I chose this specific location to build it because it is actually relatively flat in comparison to the surrounding area. So the mountain wasn't too jagged to where it was actually going to be difficult to build a giant pit. So this is more kind of like a plateau that I'm building in. And I just thought this was going to be much easier to build a quarry in. And you'll see here in just a bit, I actually build one pit, and then I decided this is a little small. I decided at one point that I'm going to build two separate mines. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want to give the impression that this is a huge operation. This is a huge mining operation. And my inspiration for kind of the design of this mine stems from the coal mines that can be found dotted all over West Virginia and parts of Kentucky. in the Appalachian Mountains. So of course, a lot of that coal industry has kind of died out since then. But in this case here, I'm kind of following that same design, but we're mining for ore, you know, for iron and silver and whatever other metals could be found in these rocks. But essentially, my goal here is to make the pit large enough to where I can actually fit a functional ore industry specialized zone down in the hole here. So I started off with kind of a small pit that I could fit like one ore industry within. And it was kind of after that where I decided I'm going to build a second pit so I can at least get like 2 or 3 of these ore industry zones going, because we all know that just one of these zones is maybe going to provide like 50 jobs or something like that. And, you know, we're going to come nowhere near providing enough jobs to actually make a dent in our unemployment. I mean, that's the whole goal of this in the first place. Spoiler alert, though, we're not really going to make that much of a dent in our unemployment in this episode, so don't get your hopes up too high. But in the following episodes, that's really where I'm going to push to, you know, actually provide as many jobs as I possibly can to the city and lower that unemployment rate. So this is kind of like the prep work for all of that. Now, again, talking about the design of this mine, I'm not going to take 100% of the credit. A little bit of the inspiration behind this build actually comes from Few Candy, who built a quarry earlier this year. I think maybe like 6 months ago, she released a video showcasing a mine that she built. And I was actually amazed by the realism and just by the process that she went through to build that mine. And it kind of inspired me to go with this project. I've always wanted to build a mine. It was always my intention to kind of build a mine at some point in my City Skylines career, and seeing that video from Few Candy just kind of gave me some inspiration to work off of. So hats off to you, Few Candy. Thanks for the inspiration. And well, of course, we need a way in and out of these mines, so I'm going to start building a road down to the main highway leading into the city, and I'm going to provide 2 separate entrances to the mining area. So we have like these 2 roads kind of heading off into different directions. So I'm just going to kind of tee off 2 separate dirt roads that are going to connect to either one of these main roads. And it's just going to allow us a little bit of extra choice when it comes to trucking the raw ore around town. So you can either go kind of east or west on either side of the city. And here, I always forget, guys, that these highways are unable to transport water or power. There's no power lines or water pipes or anything under them. I keep forgetting that. So I had to go ahead here and build a little substation to provide electricity. And then for water, I don't know if this is the case in real life at all. Maybe if somebody could shed some light on this. I decided to build a dedicated small water tower for this entire operation. I don't know if this is actually a thing that happens in real life at these large mining operations. You know, it kind of makes sense. Like a mine would probably need to get its own water somehow, and with it being very remote in the mountains, especially like the ones out in Kentucky and in West Virginia, like how would you even get water and electricity out there? So a lot of these mines, I would guess, would be quite self-sufficient. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe some of you guys know. I know it's probably just a quick Google search, but I'm literally recording audio as I'm rewatching this footage. So I'm sure it's a very easy answer to find, but I'll let you guys leave some comments down below kind of explaining. And again, as far as electricity goes, you did see me run a power line down to the main transition lines via a substation. However, I did notice that my electricity availability was kind of dipping into the orange, and I felt like this was probably a good opportunity to build a wind farm out here in the mountains, just beside the quarry. 1, because it looks cool. 2, because wind farms are a relatively cheap source of power, and there's an abundance of heavy winds out here in the hills. So I thought it was a good opportunity to build medium-sized wind farm, I would call it. Now, I have some gripes about these windmills. This is the first time, I think, that I'm building some windmills like where there's a lot of wind. Because every other time I've built these, the wind speeds were relatively low. So the blades would actually spin at a somewhat realistic speed. Here, up in the hills, these things spin at like a ludicrous speed. It's insane. It looks like these windmills are just going to take off at any moment. It's crazy. Paradox should probably do something about this because it kind of ruins the immersion a little bit. Although it gave me a good laugh, I'll be honest. It was hilarious. But anyways, not a big deal. I just thought it was kind of funny. But in all, connecting the quarry directly to the grid, to the main grid servicing the entire map, and connecting it directly to this wind farm will give it a little bit of redundancy should the main grid go down. So with that being done, we're now going to get into the second pit, which is right beside the first pit. And I'm just kind of like contouring the mountains. I'm looking at the contour lines and kind of building the quarry around the natural lines of the mountains. So I'm just trying to get this to look as realistic as possible. But I just love these large-scale projects. I've got some tunes going, I'm in the zone, and I'm just landscaping away. You know, when you get into a flow state in City Skylines, it's just the best game ever. Despite all its bugs and shortcomings, it's the kind of stuff like this that I really enjoy. And after all the landscaping, it's now time to lay out our first ore industry down in the pit. And for this one, I was a little bit more strategic. I built it just large enough to fit an entire ore industry zone in here. So I made sure that it would fit the entire contour radius where you're able to build out this zone, and it fits just perfectly. So in this pit, we're just gonna have one singular ore industry, but I found out later on that the number of jobs each one of these specialized industry zones provides is determined by the size of it. So of course, with this being like a larger ore industry zone, it's going to provide a larger amount of jobs. But I'm sure it's all relative. If I had like 3 smaller zones versus 1 large zone, it would probably provide a similar amount of jobs, I'm guessing. But anyways, to avoid cluttering the area too much, we're just going to build one. One thing you may have noticed as well, when you build out any type of specialized industry zone in this game, they always have fences around them. Well, not all of them actually, not farming. Or yeah, actually farming does as well, now that I think of it. You have like wooden fences. But in the case of ore industry, we have like these chain link fences that wrap around the whole thing. Kind of an eyesore. I would rather they just not be there. So I'm gonna go at the end of this episode and remove all of these fences. And I learned the hard way that if I remove them too early and I happen to modify the terrain in any way surrounding the zone, the fences reappear. So that's going to be the very last thing I'm going to do. I already removed the chain link fence around the first zones in the first pit, and then as soon as I slightly modified the terrain, they just reappeared. So we're going to avoid that, and I'll just remove the fences at the very end. And now comes the most tedious part of this build. Like I said, this build probably took 3.5 hours to build in total. Half of that was what I'm doing right now. So essentially, I'm just drawing a texture, a dirt texture along this whole thing. And unfortunately, it has the consequence of totally erasing those step textures. So obviously, in the game, by default, if you landscape a cliff into existence, the game will naturally kind of draw like a cliff texture where the terrain kind of goes vertical. So that's not really a thing if you just plop like this singular texture. So I am gonna have to go around this entire quarry and manually zone in these different gravel textures. And with a lot of trial and error, I determined that this particular texture kind of looks the best. I find it just kind of blends in very well with the default ore texture. So essentially, I gotta go along every one of these vertical rock faces and zone in these textures. This took like over an hour to do this, and I was just going at it. No breaks, I just went through the whole thing. It's at this moment where I realized, hey, maybe I went a little too big with this project. I should have started small. But you know what? It's gonna pay off in the end, I feel, because this is such a cool project. And I can't wait for you guys to see the very end of it. With that being said, make sure you stay to the very end, guys, of this video, because the results of this project are just so amazing. I had so much fun with this one. But yes, very tedious, very time consuming. And after about an hour, like I said, of laying down these textures and all the vertical pieces, I'm then gonna decide to slap down a bunch of different textures. In this case, I'm using kind of like a forest dirt type texture just to kind of accent the walls of the quarry a bit better. Just makes it look a bit more realistic, gives it some depth. But it's during this project that I realized I really wish we had kind of like a surface painter tool in City Skylines 2 rather than this zonable tool that we have now. They each have their applications, they each have pros and cons, but for a large scale project like I'm doing here today, I would have really preferred a kind of surface painter tool. It would have been so much easier. But that's okay. No big deal. So now what I'm doing is I've downloaded a large texture pack. So this texture pack here, I can put a link down in the description. This texture pack contains a ton of really large decals that you can plop on any surface. And again, this was totally inspired by Few Candy. I actually looked around Paradox Mods for quite some time to try to figure out, okay, what kind of textures does she have here? Because I just couldn't find them. But it turns out to be a part of this large pack that I discovered. This large pack contains tons of really cool kind of dirt textures, and by plopping an assortment of these down on the ground, the level of realism amps up a notch. Because like the default game textures don't come anywhere near to this level of fidelity and detail. So I'm basically just gonna play around here. I'm just gonna plop a whole bunch of these different textures. You'll see throughout this episode that it's kind of trial and error. I'm just kind of exploring what this texture pack has to offer. And not everything works out. Of course, you're gonna see me plop a number of decals that are like, well, what's that doing there? So yeah, I ended up like rearranging a lot of things. But these textures in particular, I really like. These kind of dirt textures, they look really great. And what I'm kind of aiming to do here is I want some of the parts of this quarry to look like they're inactive, or they've already been strip mined, there's nothing else to mine here. And that's when I'm plopping these textures in particular. So you can see that there's some grass growing, and then all that's left is maybe like some little dirt paths. You know, you can tell that this particular area within the mine is untouched and is slowly starting to grow vegetation again. So just, I don't know, small little details that run through my head as I'm building this project. And after all this texture placing and drawing, it's now time to finally start getting some props down, and this is where the quarry is really going to come to life. So I'm going to start here by plopping a whole bunch of boulders and rocks and pebbles along the sides of the quarry, and you can see immediately that it comes to life, literally. And the thing about the quarry walls in real life, they tend to be mostly untouched for the most part, except maybe a few levels that may be used for transportation, for like getting the ore up to the top of the mine. But a lot of the walls will kind of be untouched at this stage, and they're going to start to grow back some vegetation. So I'm also going to go and plop a whole bunch of little shrubs and bushes and some trees as well that maybe growing here on the outskirts of the quarry, because really the only active zone would be down in the deepest level of the pit. Because essentially, from what I understand, is when a quarry starts out, you'll start out on the surface layer and you'll work your way deeper and deeper into the hole. And for the hole not to collapse in on itself, you kind of have to build down in steps. So eventually, the hole in the middle of the quarry will get so small that eventually the quarry won't be able to go any deeper without like digging out the walls farther out. So that's what kind of makes these steps that you see. But the steps, for the most part, like I said, are untouched, except they are often used for trucks to make their way back to the top. But yeah, as you can see here, with all of these shrubs being plopped down and all these boulders, this quarry looks really, really cool, in my opinion. I'm loving the outcome of this already. And then just to add a bit more flair, I don't know, just to make this look a bit more realistic, I'm adding some brown forest floor textures to the outer rim of the quarry. And another thing that really bothers me in City Skylines 2 is the textures don't blend well together at all. Like in City Skylines 1, for example, you had like a brush tool where you could paint different textures. I mean, using mods, of course, but using the default textures in the game even, it was really easy using the Surface Painter mod to blend different textures together. For example, if you're building a beach, it was incredibly easy to create kind of like a natural, smooth transition from a grassy plains into a sandy beach. In City Skylines 2, that's not possible because the textures, they just hard stop. And that to me is kind of an eyesore. So what I try to do is to use textures that kind of fade in and out of two different textures. I don't know how to explain this, but I'm sure you guys know what I mean. But one other method that you can use to blend textures together is plop a whole bunch of trees. So that is why I built that forest ground, that brown texture down on the ground, so that I can build up a whole bunch of trees on them, and then you can't even tell that there's a hard line on that texture. It just kind of blends into the forest, and it helps just make everything look more natural, more realistic. And now I'm going to move into the second pit, and here I found some nice orange textures that I hadn't found prior to this, and this kind of looks like maybe this could be a copper mine. You know, there might be some iron or something down here, you know, with that kind of rust color. But I mean, this project really made me realize how much more the game could become if we had better textures. And I always am drawn to Manor Lords, for example, that has the most realistic ground textures of like any game. It's unreal the amount of details in that game. You know, when you plop down a path, the path just kind of naturally blends into the grass and the surrounding environment. It just looks so cool. And I just kind of wish we had more of that in City Skylines rather than these kind of jarring textures that don't blend in together. It kind of creates a lot more work for someone who's very detail oriented. And here, just for a little extra fun detailing, I decided to build some little dirt paths to each one of these wind turbines. Normally in real life, these would probably be like full-fledged dirt roads that are vehicle accessible, you know, for trucks and stuff to go out to service the turbines. But in this case here, I'm just going to build some little hiking dirt paths. And then that's basically going to be it for this project. The very final thing I'm going to do here, like I explained a bit earlier, I'm going to remove the fences that are around all of these industrial areas. And that's going to be it for this this project. So I really hope you enjoyed. And here we are, guys. Behold, after a lot of painstaking work, this is the final result. And I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with this one. I've added a little bit of industry here on the top, hoping that it would be ore related, but it just appears to be just generic industry. But I suppose we're making steel, which requires metals and stuff, and minerals and crude oil, so okay. Yeah, maybe they are kind of ore related, so that's a good thing. How much have we helped our unemployment situation? We have not at all. In fact, it's gotten worse. However, our population has actually grown a little bit too, so maybe that has something to do with it. But at least we've set the precedent to improve our unemployment rate once we start to get some proper industry zones going. But let's just take a quick look here to see what's going on in each one of these mines. So this mine in particular, we're mining metal ore, and we're employing 64 uneducated people and poorly educated people as well. So a few jobs here for the ones who don't mind the trek out of town to get all the way over here. And then oh god, this looks like the textures are kind of in the way of me selecting this mine. Okay, bear with me just a moment here, guys, while I figure out which pixel is the right one. Oh, but it looks like clicking on this tower does the trick. So we got 33 jobs in this one, and then this mine, we've got 11 employees. But as you can see, this is like... hang on here. So this is a very small operation. This one is slightly bigger, and then this is our big operation out here. So of course our job numbers correspond to the size of these pits. So yeah, that's just about it for this episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the process of watching me build this mine. And if we zoom out here, this is how it looks like within the surrounding areas. Now, we're basically just tapping into a very small portion of all of our available ore deposits. Maybe what I'll do in the future is I'm just gonna build a whole bunch of just regular specialized industry, and we won't care too much about the aesthetics, right? I won't build an actual hole and start detailing them up. That would be too crazy. But I might just, you know, do a quick little dent in the surface, like, you know, something like this, get some ore industry going, and then yeah, just as more like functional kind of thing. But anyways, that is an issue for another day, and for now we got this beautiful pit going on, and that'll pretty much do it for this episode. So guys, I really appreciate you guys tuning in here today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like, drop a comment down below, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content overall. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, consider becoming a patron or a YouTube member to get early access to all of my videos, as well as your name in the credits. So guys, again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.